So when we talk about Somali refugees, it turns out we've been starting the conversation from completely the wrong place. To really understand the full story, we have to realize we've been asking the wrong question all along. And in this explainer, we're going to dig into why that one little shift in perspective, well, it changes absolutely everything.
You see, according to our source material, our focus is just completely misplaced. The question that we tend to ask, it's not just a little unhelpful, it actually hides the real story, the one we should be paying attention to.
And here it is. This is the question, right? The one you hear everywhere, on the news, maybe in your own community. It focuses completely on the arrival, on the effect. And what it does, by focusing there, is it puts the entire burden of explaining everything right on the shoulders of the refugees themselves.
But what if we just flipped it? What if we asked this question instead? See how that immediately shifts the focus. We're no longer looking at the people who fled, we're looking at the place they fled from. It makes us hunt for a cause, right? For history, for some reason why things fell apart. And that, well, that changes the whole game.
This line it frames the whole tension perfectly. It's kind of suggesting that we have this collective historical amnesia, you know? We see the people, the human result of a crisis, standing right in front of us. But we completely forget to look back and ask about the powerful forces that might have created that crisis to begin with.
Okay, so how did we even get here? How did this become the main story? Well, it all starts with the version of events we usually tell ourselves. You know the one. It's familiar, and let's be honest, it's a lot more comforting. For a lot of us, the story of America's involvement in Somalia, well, it pretty much begins and ends right here in the 1990s with Operation Restore Hope. And the narrative is so simple, right? It's all about pure charity. America plays the hero, swooping in with food drops and peacekeepers, saving a whole nation from famine. It's a really clean story, a story of nothing but good intentions.
And here's the key takeaway from that. This official version of history, it's all about how the U.S. went in. It paints this picture of just selfless humanitarian intervention. But, and this is what the source really digs into, this story conveniently leaves out the much more complicated question of why.
And that brings us to the other side of the ledger. This is where a totally different story starts to take shape. One that, you'll see, has a lot less to do with charity and a whole lot more to do with strategy.
Now, this is a really powerful idea from our source. The thinking is that this kind of humanitarian language, it can be a way for power to launder itself. It's like using the language of helping to cover up other, more self-interested motives. It gives you a reason that sounds good to the public for actions that are really being driven by cold, hard, strategic calculation. And this is a huge piece of that calculation that almost always gets left out of that comforting story we were just talking about. Somalia's location, it's not just some random spot on the map. No way. It's right there on the Horn of Africa, sitting next to some of the most critical shipping lanes in the entire world. We're talking about the global flow of energy, goods, capital. If you can control or influence this spot, that is a massive strategic prize.
So how does a strategy like that actually work? Well, the source points out that geopolitics, especially when it comes to energy, isn't about getting oil out of the ground tomorrow. No, it's a long game. We're talking about thinking in decades. It's all about securing your position, kind of like in a chess game, and shaping the board so that you control access to resources way down the line. And this question, right here, it just cuts to the absolute heart of the matter. I mean, think about it. If the mission was only about stopping a famine, why Somalia? Why this one very specific, very strategically located country? There were so many other places on Earth facing horrible crises, some even worse, at that exact same time. Why there?
So you've got this strategic game plan, right? And it's hidden behind the nice humanitarian story. Well, that leads us to the next big idea here, how the consequences of these decisions, made so long ago, get totally disconnected from where they actually came from. So let's go back to that question of blame. Why do we end up blaming a refugee? It's simple, really. Because the refugee is visible. You can see them in your neighborhood. You hear a new accent at the local store. What's invisible? The dusty old policy memos from 30 years ago. The retired government officials, long forgotten, who signed off on the decisions that ultimately led those people to your town. It's just human nature, right? We focus on what we can see, what's right in front of our faces.
And this idea is what the source calls the broken timeline. It's a great way to put it. There's just this huge time lag,
a huge delay between a foreign policy decision and the real human consequence, like when refugees show up in a new country. The two events feel completely separate, like they have nothing to do with each other. That chain of cause and effect, it's been broken by nothing more than the passing of time.
Let's just walk through this chain of events, step by step. First, a decision gets made, somewhere far away in a capital city. Then, over many years, that decision helps to destabilize a whole other nation. Finally, decades later, the people who are escaping that chaos arrive somewhere new. And by that point, who's going to connect their arrival all the way back to that original decision? Nobody. It just looks like a brand new problem, not what it really is, the final chapter of a very old story.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's mentally reconnect that broken timeline. Let's draw a line from that geopolitical ledger, from those strategic decisions, all the way to the neighborhoods where refugees are living today. If we do that, what's the big takeaway? What do we find?
Well, the fundamental conclusion that the source material builds to is this. It's a direct challenge to that very first question we started with. Why are they here? Because it turns out their presence, that isn't the problem we need to solve.
They're the consequence. They are the logical, predictable outcome of that long chain of events we just talked about. They're a result, the living, breathing manifestation of decades of policy and intervention and strategic games.
And that brings us to the core metaphor of this whole thing. Think about it. A receipt. What is a receipt? It's proof that a transaction happened. It's the itemized bill for actions that were taken in the past. And in this view, refugees are the receipt. They are the living, breathing proof of foreign policies that were put into motion a long, long time ago. They are the tangible evidence that a bill has finally come due. So at the end of the day, when you reframe the whole conversation, when you stop asking, why are they here, and start asking, why was their home broken, the entire dynamic of who's accountable just gets flipped completely on its head. And so the source leaves us with one final powerful question to think about. Who should we really be holding accountable? The people who make the wars, or the people who manage to survive?